Hello, everybody. We're going to be talking today about citing sources. That's one thing that I got a lot of question mark looks on faces when we were going over the rubric about how we need to make sure that we're citing sources correctly to get a 3 or a 4 on that rubric for an argument essay and for any type of essay, basically. So you have a handout that you're filling out while we are completing this video, so make sure you have that in front of you. And of course, you need to pause as you go. There are going to be some things you fill in just to help you keep you on track and focused, okay, and understanding the topic. So we're going to be talking about citing sources using direct and indirect quotations. It's okay if you don't memorize this. We're going to be practicing this with anything we write. And I'm sure you've already heard a lot of this before. It's just always great to review so that when we get to our essay writing, we are clear about it, okay? So the first question on your handout is, what does it mean to cite your sources? So cite that's different kind of cite. If you look at the spelling, it's not like S-I-G-H-T, like you see something. This time cite means that you are giving credit in your writing to someone else's work. That means that when you write something like, if I say 75% of all students think this, okay, well, if that was not my research, if I didn't go out and interview all of the students and do research with it and know it for myself, then I need to say where I got that information. I don't just throw that out there. So if you're giving credit, it's to whatever someone else's words were, their ideas presented, such as facts, number facts, and information, or just anything else they've created. If you're writing about a poem, well, that's something that someone created. If you're writing about an article, you're getting evidence from an article, that's something they created. So it could even be a piece of art. If you're writing about an artist and a type of art that they did, that's something they created. You need to give credit to that person. You don't just say, this is my art, okay? And this is what it's talking about. So there's two ways to cite a source in your writing. The first way is what's called a direct quotation, and the second one is called an indirect quotation. So what is a direct quotation? We also call it a quote. This is any time you give the exact spoken or written words of another person. It's also surrounded by quotation marks. And so we always know that quotation marks is when someone's talking, but it's also the exact words of someone else. So you never, ever, ever write in copy from a text into your own writing, because you're basically stealing someone else's words. You're basically saying, those are my words, when they really aren't. You're lying. So that's why it's super important that if you copy, that you use quotation marks. So this is an example of what it might look like. You have quotation marks and the words are surrounded by them. So here's some examples of some direct quotations. So here's one that we might see, especially in a story, maybe not in an essay, but "Good morning, class," Mrs. Thornton cheerfully exclaimed. So the part in black are my exact spoken words. A lot of times I'll say that, right? So if you wrote exactly what I said, that's a direct quotation. And then the white part is basically you're citing where you heard that. We also call that in a story the narration. It's anything outside the quotation or the dialogue is the narration. But in an essay, we call that the citation, where you're citing where did you get those words. And so here's an example of something you would see in an essay according to source 2. And again, that's citing our source. That means, like, where did we get that information? And then here's the direct quote from source 2. Educators notice a decline in students' ability to concentrate. So those are not my words, they're source 2's words. And that's why it's called a direct quotation. And you can see those are exact written words. So here are some rules we need to follow when we're using direct quotations in an essay or any time we're writing, even if it's a story. Always begin a direct quotation with a capital letter. We'll go over that more in detail. Use quotation marks at the beginning and the end of a quotation, and use commas and end marks, and they go before the quotation mark at the end. We'll go over that. So let's look at that first rule again. Always begin a direct quotation with a capital letter. So you can see here's an example where I start with source 2 states, studies show that 75% of all teenagers use cell phones. So why am I using a capital here when it's not the beginning of the sentence? The sentence starts with source 2, right? So the beginning of my quote, that means the beginning of where I'm going to start copying, is that word studies. And that's why it's a capital letter there, okay? Look at this next one. Now I'm at the beginning, but why is it a capital? Well, obviously it's the beginning of my sentence, but it's also the beginning of the quote. Now I want you to notice something. In the first one, I cited my source at the beginning and I said source 2 states. This time, what did I do? I put it at the end of my quote with parentheses. And that means it's not, I didn't copy those words, but basically the parentheses are telling my reader, hey, I got this from source 2. So this is another way to use it. It's what's called parenthetical quote, which basically just means I'm using the parentheses to let my reader know where I got it. This is really handy dandy, and you're going to use this in high school and college, so it doesn't hurt to start now, okay? So here's rule 2 about direct quotations. Use quotation marks at the beginning and end of the quotation. Remember, quotation marks are these that are in black. So make sure that you guys are really good at doing the quotation mark at the end, but you're awful at this last one. So remember, when you're done copying, use the quotation mark at the end of that sentence that you're copying. And just a note on that, don't copy more than, I would just do one sentence, at the most 2 together. Never go on and copy a whole paragraph from a text, okay? Look at this next example. Here we have the quotation mark at the beginning of the quote and at the end after parentheses after I told where I got my information, or after I cited it. Okay, that's rule 2. Let's go on to rule 3. Commas and end marks go before the quotation mark at the end. So let's look at the examples here. So look at this comma here. If I'm going to cite my source at the beginning, like source 2 states or according to source 2, I put a comma and then the quotation mark. When I'm done, look, I've got my period before the quotation mark. Okay, look at this next one. Studies, so we're starting with the quote. And again, here's my parentheses. Look what I got to put. I got to put my period at the end. If you're ending at the middle of a sentence, then remember we can do the ... here. Okay, up here again. If this was the middle of a sentence, but I want to end it there, I can do the ... Okay. So that was direct quotations if I copy the exact words. What if I want to put it in my own words? Well, that's what indirect quotations are. When a writer puts another person's spoken or written words, what? Into their own words. So we also call this paraphrase. When using someone else's words in writing, you still must cite your evidence. This means you give that person credit for their ideas. So let's look at that in action here. So here's a direct quotation. Remember, that's when we use quotation marks. We saw that before. Now look what I do here to turn that into my own words, an indirect quotation. Now look what happened. Instead of saying studies show, I took that out completely, and that's 75% of all teenagers. What did I do? I changed that to most teens. So I put that in my own words, own a cell phone. And look what I did. I still told that I got that in source 2. Do I need quotation marks? No, because those are not the exact words that source 2 gives us. Okay, let's look at another one. According to source 2, okay, that's direct quotation. I'm using quotation marks. Now look what I do this time for indirect. Instead of saying educators notice, what did I say? People who work in education. That's my own words. What do they notice? I put instead are seeing, what do they see? A decline in students. What does that mean? Seeing that students are struggling with what? The ability to concentrate. I just said they're struggling to concentrate in school. Same idea, my own words. I don't use quotation marks, but do I still need to give you my source? Yes. I could say according to source 2 and then just put it in my own words. I could put it at the beginning as well. Okay, so we're going to be doing, you can use again in your essay either direct or indirect quotations. I'm hoping that this video helped you with that and that we practice trying maybe some of those parenthetical or parentheses to cite our sources, okay? And use this handout for notes so that you can go back and see how to do it on your own. Happy quoting.